if the government gets away with violating, basic human rights and bodily autonomy rights, Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights to due process, your First Amendment right to basic free speech and your religious beliefs, then they'll be able to get away with it for the rest of the population. That is why I think it was so important for the administration, the executive branch, to make sure that the government fell in line and had the military follow these orders regardless of their lawfulness.
For those of you who love our country and love today's episode, in early February, Pete Hegseth, the head of the Department of Defense, put this memorandum in place in order to reinstate soldiers who were voluntarily or involuntarily ousted from the military due to the grounds that they did not want to take the COVID vaccine. And it was very unfortunate. Today we have two really special guests. We have Lieutenant Colonel Rocco, who served in the Air Force for a very long time, and Commander Robert Green, who's with the Navy for a very long time. And these two, not only people who have signed up to serve our country, they've been activists, and in fact, Commander Green has written this book, Defending the Constitution Behind the Enemy Lines, a story of hope for those who love liberty. And we're going to dig in and find out their story and how they fought for everybody and fought for our country and the rights behind our Constitution. So I'd like to start off. Why were you drawn to, Carolyn, I can call you Carolyn.
Yes.
Why were you drawn to military service in the first place?
To be honest, it was a job opportunity. I was 22, 23 at the time, and I just didn't want to wait tables anymore. And so the Air Force offered me an opportunity to serve, and I thought it was just going to be 4 years, and I'd get out and continue life. But those 4 years as an enlisted C-130 aircraft maintainer were some of the best years of my life. And so I made a decision at that point that I wanted to make the Air Force my career for the next 20 plus years. So I separated from active duty to to complete my degree and graduate via ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Command, and then I came back in as an officer in 2007.
Well, we're very appreciative of your service to our country, and I can call you Rob.
No, please.
What I understand is that it was little boy dreams that drew you to the military.
That's exactly right. Nobody in my family had ever been in the Navy, and I found a book when I was about 8 years old called The Magnificent Mariner. It's a book about John Paul Jones, one of the founding fathers of the Navy, and I fell in love with the idea of combat at sea, of riding the waves of a ship and leading men in combat and trying to do things with the Navy. And so at the end of the book, there's a section about officer training, and it mentions United States Naval Academy. And so that became my dream. I researched everything about it and did everything I could to get into the Naval Academy. And then, like Carolyn, I commissioned in 2007 and out of the Naval Academy.
You were on the front line. You were defending your people, which these are the stories I love. You guys are heroes. You were already heroes because you were willing to put down your life for us, for Americans. But now you took it a step further and you were willing to sacrifice everything for everybody around you that was in the situation that maybe they didn't have the strong voice that you had. But even with that voice, you could have been arrested. You could have been fired. You already had so many ramifications. Share with us your journey from the beginning, from when the shot was announced and when you were told that it's mandatory. Just go through it. What was the process? Just share. Whoever wants to go first.
You want to go first? Go ahead.
All right, I'll start. Thanks. She threw me under the bus. So it wasn't immediate where we went into a mandate situation. It started off with a very soft level of coercion. There was significant fear, as you both know, as we all know. There was a heightened amount of fear being pushed on our populace, and so the same thing was happening in the Navy, in all the services, and so they conditioned military members to these sometimes way over the top mitigation measures. People were masking, people were 6 feet from each other all the time. And in the military, as you can imagine, if they were getting the population to do this in the grocery store, the military was very regimented with this. And so it was a significant amount of coercion pushed. And then they started introducing, at the time, voluntary shots. And it was voluntary, sort of. There was significant pressure put on the commanders from the upper levels within the DoD to get their shot percentages up within units. And so, as you know, if you're graded on something, and they were graded on how well they're mitigating health risks, it ended up causing significant pressure to be put on junior service members. And so that was the environment that Carolyn and I found ourselves trying to protect junior people, make sure that they understood their rights. You do not have to do this. You have a choice. These are all products that have been introduced into the market as emergency use products. And so you have rights. You can say no. And so that was the environment leading up to the mandate. And so at that point, I'll turn it over to you, Carolyn.
I was in the Washington, Idaho area. I was an ROTC instructor at the time. And Rob was...
I was in Rhode Island. And I was leading a 650-person unit doing security details.
So as leaders, you both instinctively jumped in to basically defy your bosses, right?
Not defy, because at that point, all the orders were mostly lawful. There were some masking and testing requirements that started to toe the line on lawfulness. We can get into that later in the show. But we identified early on the fear and the coercion that were occurring.
Right. Because at this point, there wasn't a mandate. It was
right.
Serious pressure.
Right. Like COVID is so bad, right? Grandma's dying. Like, if you really care about your wingman, you're going to mask, you're going to get your shot. That now that they're voluntary, there's no mandate. But, just that guilt that they put on you. If you care about each other, this is what you'll do.
So we're looking at like January 2021 or thereabouts.
Through 2020, most of this, and then the shots introduced. I think December 11th is when they first
2020
hit the market of 2020.
This was all happening before. This was happening before the shot was introduced, right?
Yes.
So basically, making it separate, make sure you mask.
Right. I mean,
the shot comes out, do the right thing, preparing your mind for it.
So where I worked at both Washington State University and University of Idaho. They're only separated by 7 miles, but they operated completely different. Anybody who's familiar with Washington and Idaho is very much more a conservative state, cares about freedoms, and so they didn't shut the school down, whereas Washington State University did shut down, and it was all education and training was completed via online, via Zoom or Teams or what have you. And so, even trying to get my commander to ask for an exemption so that the ROTC students, the cadets, we had about 100 in our cadet wing, could actually come together and learn how to march. You know how difficult it is to try to teach marching and facing movements on Zoom? I know it sounds silly, and when you look back, people are like, "You're kidding me." I'm not kidding. And unfortunately,
we recorded some of those.
We do have that. And so again, I was a major at the time, and I said, "Sir, we did this for one semester. We cannot do this for another semester." And so I encouraged him to apply for an exemption, which was granted. And so the ROTC students were able to be in person the spring semester of whatever it was, 21.
I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on at the moment, which I love. My husband makes fun of it, but I think he kind of has one too, and he tries to, it's on him as well. He doesn't embrace it as much as I do. But, this had to be passed down from somewhere high, far, and it infiltrated the very DNA of our country, of our leaders, of our government, of our medical community, everywhere. Where do you think this came from?
There's definitely a spiritual aspect to all of this. But if you look at it from a more worldly perspective, they've written books about one world order, new world order, this globalist society to where there are no sovereign borders. We're just all one big blob, if you will. And if we, of all countries, were to remove our borders and our sovereignty, and most importantly, our constitutional rights, our God-given rights protected by the Constitution, the first way to make those borders disappear is to weaken the military. And so how do we weaken the military? We get rid of those who have a faith that's higher than a person that has 4 stars on their shoulder. We get rid of the critical thinkers that are saying this doesn't make sense and the evidence doesn't show that this mandate is legit, lawful, safe, effective, all of the things that we were hearing. So to me, if you lose the military, you lose a country. And so if we had, and at the time, an administration who didn't seem to have America's best interest at heart. So, I mean, I don't know President Biden. I don't know what their mindset was as far as going full into this new world order idea, but that does not escape me. And it lines up pretty well if we were to be like every other country and become part of the blob that these globalists want, right? It's them and then it's the rest of us, and we're the pawns. We're the ones who would be enslaved forever. And I think that's a big part of it.
I think that's a good answer. And he also tried to, I think there were some strange laws that were signed where he wanted to give the WHO power over if there's next pandemic. So there, he was really pushing towards removing that sovereignty. And, our Constitution is what makes us who we are.
Right.
The right to bear arms.
Right.
Is another reason why we haven't been invaded, because so many Americans have guns that, it's just not going to happen. So I feel like, one by one, it seems like they were really trying to just tear that to shreds. Why? I don't know. I don't understand it. Like, if you represent America, why wouldn't you try and keep it strong?
Right. It's $1 million question.
We have a school, by the way, and you can imagine how impossible it is to teach 3-year-olds over Zoom.
Right. Right. Well, not much different probably from, brand new college students and ROTC cadets. So, but yeah, they try to make life as difficult as possible so that when the vaccine, in my opinion, was rolled out, it was like, oh yeah, this will get us to that level of freedom that we all wish we had, for the last year. And so people were eager to roll up their sleeves and get the shot. I wasn't, Rob wasn't, obviously you weren't, but there were many, many who were. And then they looked at us like, you guys are weird, right? You're conspiracy theorists. Like, it's just a shot. You're in the military. You've taken all the other shots. Why are you raising a fuss over? Well, that was post-mandate after.
Yeah, well, it's my understanding when you join the military, you get pumped with vaccines from day, like right away. I actually know somebody who has an adverse injury from that experience. You're not opposed to that, or you weren't at the time, and now you are. There's regret. What do you stand on those?
There's definitely regret on my part. I never in a million years thought that the government or the country that I signed up to serve and protect would do something that would potentially harm me. I thought everything was vetted, everything was legit. So you go on deployment, you get your anthrax shot, your smallpox shot, flu shot. And again, I didn't think anything of it. Thankfully, I haven't had any adverse effects from vaccinations. But that's a mentality that COVID really showed us we need to change. That culture of, oh, you're in the military, roll up your sleeves, you're just a pincushion. Absolutely not. So we're also excited for Bobby Kennedy to be the Secretary of HHS.
Yeah, so are we.
Yeah.
It's the blind obedience that they want. And what I love about what you both seem to have is the critical thinking brain, which is what we really want our country to have. As David mentioned, we have a school, and the foundation is critical thinkers. So we were also in a similar battle, well, different but similar. I mean, when the masks were mandated, I was like, I can't do this to my kids. I can't do this to my teachers who need to spend 8 hours a day standing up in front of a class. Can you imagine? Standing up trying to teach these little kids, that's hard enough. I wasn't going to mandate it.
But you went deep on the learning, and she brought in experts to really understand the masks and the effectiveness. She brought in OSHA experts and really doctors, and before she made those kinds of very controversial decisions.
Bobby Kennedy spoke at our school in January 2021. We were way ahead of the curve. That's awesome. So tell us, the mandate came around. You were holding your ground. You were giving the advice to your junior people that, hey, you don't have to do this. It's a choice. critically think.
Did you
Let's wait.
persuade them one way or the other, or did you just let them figure it out for themselves?
In the beginning, they were telling them to.
So it was about rights for us. It's about the law. And so, we get to the mandate, and we've already been trying to make sure that the people that we lead understand, their obligations to follow lawful orders, their obligations to disobey and resist unlawful orders. And we get to the mandate, and it doesn't take long for us to do some research and find out in the first couple weeks, they don't have any of the fully authorized FDA products out on the shelves anywhere. By that point, we had been networking, and this is, part of how Carolyn and I and hundreds of other service members who were really leaning into this fight and leading first met each other. We began networking. They were trying to isolate us, and we broke through that, and we developed an incredible network across all the services, all the ranks. And, we had plans. We worked together. We got service members into every one of the military, or I say everyone, every military treatment facility that we could get people into and get access to ask, hey, where is this FDA authorized product that the order from Secretary Lloyd Austin says that you have to have in order to mandate it? So that order, yes, we can get into that order.
The legal portion of this is all based on the label. What is on the label, whether they're the same formula or not. If you don't have a label that says fully FDA approved, the Comirnaty, I'm sorry, it is not a fully approved vaccine. And so therefore, we cannot fulfill this order because the fully FDA approved vaccine did not exist.
Yeah, bait and switch.
Is it safe to say that what rubs both of you the wrong way is more the constitutional rights or the body autonomy?
All of it. I mean, and even from a common sense perspective, I was sharing earlier that in the past, I had gotten waivers, exemptions for other vaccines. If you show in your blood positive titers, right, from previous vaccinations or infection, you can get exempt. And I had COVID naturally. I had the titers, and even my medical exemption was denied. So everything that applied to us before COVID did not apply to this particular situation. And that was probably, you add that to denied religious accommodations, just the absence of common sense is what's kind of sparked my frustration. Yeah. Like, this doesn't make, guys, can you read? Like, we're not making this isn't our opinion.
And to come out with the shot that fast.
Right.
And to make the most important group of service members who are here to protect us in time of war be the guinea pigs.
Imagine if it went terribly wrong and massive adverse reactions.
So that's a really good point. I talk about that in the book. There is a Navy commander. He's since retired. He ran for Congress in Texas. His name's Jay Furman. He put out some research and an article where he talked about there's a better plan. He did it about maybe a month before the mandate came out. And he said, hey, we should only allow half of the force to take the shot for readiness sake, because we don't know. There's a reason emergency use authorized products exist. It's because you throw out a lot of the safety requirements. And so, we want to make sure that the force stays healthy. Here's a great plan. Allow people to voluntarily take it, maybe up to half the force. And then you have a control group and another group. And that's how we make sure if something bad happens that you still have a ready force. And they went after him. They didn't like that. And he ended up being on Tucker Carlson. Tucker invited him on the show to talk about this.
Do you know where these shots were manufactured?
We were told France, I think. But we trying to do some.
Possible?
Anything is possible, I think, at this point.
The whistleblower report, we actually had a service member reach out to Pfizer. We got a recording of it, and we discussed that. We gave it to Congress, and Senator Ron Johnson actually turned around in a day and sent a request to the DOD. Says, hey, service members are reporting that Pfizer hasn't produced the right thing, that there's label bait and switch stuff going on. Like, let's get to the bottom of this. And the DOD at the time, under that leadership, did what they have been doing throughout that administration. They ignored Congress's request for information.
But what I found interesting, so you wrote an incredible whistleblower letter Just pull that up. We could put these documents. Could we put these documents on the links?
Absolutely.
Alice, if you can put this document on the link too, the link below, the memorandum for all members of Congress. And I think it's fascinating that only one or two Congress members read this document and they didn't all jump up and say, stop this immediately. And, it's a sad situation in our country right now because they are supposed to be here for the people. Our service members are here for the people, yet everyone turned their back on everyone. And the congressmen who, as we all know, get very big checks from pharma. I'm hoping that over the next 4 years, there's more laws that go into place that stop this because we need to get back to where we were a long time ago, which is for the people, we the people.
What do you think is really going on here? Is it just the pursuit of profits by the big pharmaceutical companies, or is it just group controlled? As a civilian, we're thinking that it's just profits and getting people to comply with orders. What was happening?
I'd like to take that one if I may, just because I think I can hit it pretty quick. But I think the issue is, and then we've talked about this in many of our strategy sessions with other service members. If the military goes, the rest of the country goes. That's the group, the small, narrow group of the population that the government thinks they have the most control over. That's the group who have voluntarily suspended the exercise of some of their rights. They never lose their rights, but we suspend, for example, we wear the same uniform. That's part of the agreement when we sign on. We wear the uniform of that service. We don't, show up in our Van Halen t-shirt or something at formation. We suspend some of those First Amendment rights. Like when we speak in an event like this, we need to make sure we're following statutory law, Uniform Code of Military Justice. However, if the government gets away with violating, basic human rights and bodily autonomy rights, Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights to due process, your First Amendment right to basic free speech and your religious beliefs, then they'll be able to get away with it for the rest of the population. That is why I think it was so important for the administration, the executive branch, to make sure that the government fell in line and had the military follow these orders regardless of their lawfulness or not. And so when we challenged the lawfulness, as we identified a number of laws that were broken that we can get into, and we will name names. I certainly don't mind naming names. The moment there was a constitutional challenge, our admirals and generals should have put it all stop on this. They should have challenged the executive branch and said, hey, we have a constitutional question here. We have a legal question under this order. We need to stop it and study this and make sure that we're doing this right. Instead, they leaned in and they said, we don't care. They dismissed thousands of challenges that we wrote and submitted up our chain of command to say that this is breaking the law, the way you're implementing this mandate. Like we talked about before, the original order from the Secretary of Defense, that was lawful. The service secretaries, at least the Navy service secretary, that was a lawful order. The CNOs was a lawful order. It gets down to Admiral Christopher Grady was the first person that I was able to see who issued an unlawful order disregarding the FDA approval authority of the product. And he said, basically, the order was, you're going to take this anyway, regardless of the emergency use of the product. So that was the first unlawful order. That's how I think we get at this thing in the future, because, we're not going to sit there. I don't think it's good for Secretary Hegseth to just declare the entire thing unlawful, because that's not true. It doesn't do justice to how complicated this was. It was a lawful order originally, but it was implemented.
That was lawful was if it was a FDA-approved drug.
Exactly.
That's the part that was lawful.
The implementation, and then at the 3 and the 4-star level, that implementation is where it started to go unlawful. And then the religious accommodation processes were unlawful, and there was other unlawful coercion that we can talk about.
Because even if it was FDA approved, you're still allowed your religious exemption, no matter what, right?
Exactly. And the government then, as the statutes declare, the government then has to prove that the compelling government interest outweighs the religious rights of the individual, and that never happened. The government just said, health. Because of health. And like, no, that doesn't meet what is actually in the statute. You have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that outweighs.
So the courts were against your religious exemption, but then some things changed and flipped, and you were actually having some wins. So would you share, either of you, both of you share what happened there?
Well, I know the Air Force injunction came only because of the Navy injunction. And there was a really important part that Rob is going to share of why the Navy got a win to set the precedent.
Maybe somewhere between 75 and 90% of the SEALs ended up getting fake cards and basically doing what the leadership needed so they could check a box and say, okay, as people were vaccinated. They truly weren't. Well, there were a few Navy SEALs who had a deep level of integrity and said, we're not going to lie. And those were the Navy SEALs that stood up, and many of them filed a lawsuit. At one point, it was reported to me that the judge told some of these lawyers, there's nothing I can do. There's no real evidence here that the Navy's, breaking the law, and they are claiming that they're going through all the right processes in accordance with the statute. And it had just been shortly before that a whistleblower leaked a document to me. It was called a standard operating procedure that they had written out of the Chief of Naval Personnel's office to deny all religious accommodations that were requested in the Navy. And this document, actually, there was one section of it that said, hey, it's really important to protect the admiral, the Chief of Naval Personnel, and in this case, Admiral Waters, the leader of this section of this team that dealt with religious accommodations. It's really important that we make this well documented so that if we're ever audited or if there's ever a lawsuit, that we can defend it and say that what we were doing is lawful. And what the religious accommodation standard operating procedure actually does is it tells the staffer in that office, when you get an accommodation in, one of the very first things you do is you open the template denial and you put the name of the requester in the top of the denial template, and then you route that for review. And then once that template for denial is written, it has the right name at the top, you route that for review for all the offices, including the JAG office, by the way. And then only after that has all happened and it's ready for the 3-star admiral's final signature, at that point, the staffer is then told to open up the document of the actual religious accommodation and then make sure you put into a spreadsheet his reasons for doing the accommodation, so that if we're ever have a lawsuit, if we're ever audited, we can show that we opened the document. So that got to court, and then within a couple days, the very first injunction for the 35 Navy SEALs and special operators came through, the ruling from the judge saying you can't kick these people out. And then it was shortly after that, maybe a month or two after that, that they expanded that case from just the 35 SEALs into an entire class-wide injunction that stopped the Navy from kicking out any Navy service members. And then the Air Force followed suit shortly after that.
So for the Air Force, it was right around 9,700 who had submitted a religious accommodation, and they were all denied with the same process. Right? You literally just swap out the name, swap out the location, but the meat of that memo, of that denial memo, read the exact same, and it was all just hubbub. There was nothing meaty there was nothing tangible to their denial. There's no reason for them to deny our religious accommodation for
health of the force.
Health of the force, right? Just very generic, the same words, right? Good order and discipline, and like nothing that if you asked, explain to me how this will play out, there are no examples, because there were just words that I'm sure they were told to repeat.
That their lawyers said, this is how we can make this thing look legal.
Educated people with multiple PhDs just blindly following, standing in line to get your third, fourth, fifth shot. Just, okay, 2 masks while I'm jogging in the car. Like what happens? Brains.
Here's where that is deeply concerning to us in the military. The 3 and the 4-star leaders that are supposed to be making sure that we're defending our nation, they took that mindset too. We're going to blindly follow this order, even though our subordinates are reporting that this might be illegal and this might be unconstitutional. They blindly followed and dismissed all legitimate claims, both medical claims that it wasn't effective, medical evidence that it wasn't safe, and legal reasons to not take it, and constitutional basis for people to refuse. They ignored all of that, and what you end up having are senior leaders who you cannot trust to properly defend the nation if we have an actual war. These are not the critical thinkers that I want telling us where to put our assets, how to defend our nation. If they are unable to critically think through this problem and make the right decisions, I don't want them leading us in war.
And is the guy that overruled this and did this unlawful order, is he still there today?
So I was able to identify the elements for Article 94 under the UCMJ, that's mutiny. And there were 3 elements that are required to charge somebody with mutiny. So what Admiral Christopher Grady did apparently met each one of those elements of the law required to charge somebody with mutiny. So I filed a complaint up my chain of command against then Fleet Forces Commander Admiral Christopher Grady for violation of Article 94 mutiny. And of course, that was dismissed very quickly. And then,
I know. I'm telling you, he has
Career
led.
suicide.
I love it.
well, they fired me shortly after that. But then they dismissed that complaint. And 3 weeks later, he was promoted to be the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under General Milley, and he remains in that position to this day.
Wow. So they fired you?
So they relieved me of my duties shortly after that for refusing to take emergency use products. And then, so they sent me home. Actually, they banned me from my building first. I wasn't allowed to enter. And so my team, and I'm leading a 650-person unit.
Brave people like you guys.
It was snowy in Rhode Island, and so I would drive in and work out of my car, and it was unfortunate for my team members. They'd have to come out to me to do paperwork or business or whatever. But that lasted a couple weeks before they finally said, hey, you can't enter the building, and so you're fired. Okay, I mean, it's your order that said I can't enter the building. I'm being effective from my car. So the order was go home and call in every day, and you're done. And at that point, I think they were trying to find ways to involuntarily separate me or court-martial me or whatever. And then it was only a few months later that we started winning in court, and then they couldn't go through with firing me. So I was still making paycheck, luckily, because I have 7 kids.
So how did it feel?
Well, you just passed that one. You had 7 kids, honey.
So I'll tell you how it felt. It felt significantly risky, but for a very brief period, I had a lot of fear about what to do. I'm going to lose my job. I could go to prison. Because they were challenging, or they were telling us, hey, you could be court-martialed for a violation of a lawful order. We told them it was not lawful. We showed them how it was not lawful in the statutes. But they were, essentially saying we don't care, and we could file charges and take you to court-martial. And it was for a commission of a serious offense, which, if you put those 2 things together, it could come with jail time. So my wife, Mary Claire, and I had to make a tough decision. How far are we willing to go for what's right? And, it only took an evening of talking through it. I said, we're going to go all the way. We don't care. And that was what gave me the courage to file that mutiny complaint, to
Let's give
go
your
all
wife
the way.
some props.
Oh, yes.
You must have an amazing wife.
She's the real hero. So I called my dad, and I told him, hey, here's our plan. If I go to prison, please take my wife in and my kids in. I'll serve my time. I'll come out. I'll swing hammers. I'll dig ditches, whatever it takes. Put food on the table. But this is our plan. And the moment I did that, talk about how it felt. The moment I did that, I had such peace. I had such joy. I never had so much fun in my life fighting the government. And that's the energy that helped bring it. Total giving it to God. And I was able to just have a blast. And I've never had so much fun in my life fighting back because I don't care about the outcome.
7 kids. I love it.
I'd be like, give me the jab.
No, I'm with you because I told him the same thing. Like, honey, if I get arrested, I just ask you to bail me out as fast as you can.
She said, I'll be handcuffed to the front door.
I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not mandating these shots. I'm not mandating these masks. So I get it.
We were shitting a brick, pardon the expression, when went all the way to the Supreme Court. Any employer that has 100 or more employees.
We were tracking that case.
That's right.
Very close.
Yes.
And the only reason why it was disallowed was because the vaccine wasn't performing as effectively at that moment as they thought it would. It had just been released.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been really
more people were fighting.
Yeah.
Like you guys, like us. This would have been over way soon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And this is why I tell people, like, yeah, it's risky at the moment, but if in your heart and soul you're doing the right thing, God is going to come back and you are going to be fine, even though it feels really bad at the moment. But I love that you did that.
I know.
And so you met through this group that you created. Was it like a WhatsApp group or something like that? How did you?
I don't even remember what platform we were
using.
No
name. We're just a bunch of patriots trying to do the right thing.
Oh, did you hear about this guy or that guy? So, he talked about filing charges of mutiny against this commander. His documents were leaked. I say leaked. They were... you approved.
And internally shared in our group.
Shared, right? So as I was going, right, on the other side of the country, when others of us were fighting this battle in our own, individual capacity, we were using each other's documents. And what research did Rob do? What research did I do? And like, hey, did you look at this? Or did you look at that? And maybe if you include this, it'll help your cause. And I remember seeing using mostly Rob's work because he's so thorough and he references every, whether it's an article of the Constitution, a law, a DOD policy. And so eventually we met, but it was all virtual for at least a year and a half or so.
You have to tell the story of the first time we met at Mark Bashaw's court-martial, the only court-martial that we knew of at the time for a service member not taking an emergency use product.
So we had a friend, Mark Bashaw. Again, I was in Idaho, and there was a lot of activity happening on the East Coast. And I heard that there was a prior enlisted Air Force member who had cross-serviced into the Army. He was a first lieutenant. So in officer rank, that's very low ranking. So first lieutenant. But when you look at this 15 plus years of experience he had as enlisted, he was actually a well-trained and knowledgeable serviceman. And he refused the testing and the masking.
As was his right under the law.
Right. Because even the masks, if you look at the box that the masks, it says EUA, right? And that federal statute doesn't say just EUA vaccines. It says EUA products. That includes the masks. That includes the test. And so he had every right. He was also a public health affairs officer, like a medical officer, not a doctor seeing patients, but he had all of this data. He had filed protected communication up his chain of command, warning them of all the adverse events that he was seeing with this data, and they ignored it. And so he unfortunately was court-martialed. I was, again, in Idaho, and I'm like, I don't know if he has any friends or family on the East Coast. So there's just something stirring in my soul. I'm like, I have to fly out there and support him. And so
a lot of us descended upon that town in Maryland to be there at the court-martial. That's the first place most of us met.
There were about 15 of us, I think, in total.
There to protect this guy.
Yeah, maybe 20. Could have been more. We have pictures, so we'll have to find them.
Yeah. And so that was when Rob showed up in his uniform, and he wasn't wearing a name tag, but I was introduced to him. And our other friend JJ said, "This is Rob Green." And I'm like, wait, what? This is Rob Green? And it's literally starstruck. Like these are my heroes. Rob is my hero. JJ's my hero. Liv is my hero. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a really tight network of people helping lead this and share with our junior people how to fight back against, unlawfulness in the military, how to use law to protect your rights and make sure that our leaders are held accountable to do the right thing. We swore an oath to do it.
You had quite the battle too.
So I was, again, an ROTC instructor in the Pacific Northwest, and about 18 years in, I tried again for a medical exemption, denied. I even tried to get on a clinical trial, right? Because surely they're going to need the unvaccinated. And that was denied as well. And so the order came down to get the shot or apply for separation. And I said, well, I'm going to submit that a religious accommodation, knowing that it was going to be denied. But again, that was just going to give me additional time to figure out what I'm going to do as a civilian if I did get kicked out. And so again, my religious accommodation was denied. I appealed it. The appeal was denied. And I had many friends and mentors saying, Carolyn, you're at 18 years in. Like, if you get kicked out, that's your retirement. It's gone. I said, do you not understand that none of us are going to have a retirement if this type of behavior continues? If they're willing and able to invade my body, they're going to have no problem invading my bank account to take my retirement. So, and money is not what drives me. Doing the right thing is what drives me. And so, again, I was prepared to get kicked out, and thankfully there was a judge, McFarland from Ohio, that granted an injunction in the summer of 2022 that basically said, okay, Air Force, you need to stop giving letters of reprimand, administratively separating service members, and that is what basically saved my career and the only reason why I'm still serving today.
Were you culturally ostracized by your peers or anything like that happen?
So in an ROTC unit for the instructors, there were only 6 or 7 of us. I did have a coworker who was on my side, so we had each other. But there were cadets, right? The 100 cadets that we were leading to do the right thing. And there were some of them who, again, looked at us like, you guys are just like weird, like just get the shot. Even my commander, he didn't understand why we were willing to potentially throw our 18 years away. So I didn't feel it as much as maybe a bigger unit, just because we were so small. And again, in Idaho, I mean, everybody were in my community, they were of the same mindset. So it was somewhat easy for me, but I have family members and friends who they didn't understand my train of thought. And, unfortunately that put a strain on those relationships.
So you had some family members that stopped talking to you because of your stance?
I would say not completely, but paused significantly. Yeah. And I will also say, we were talking about fitness earlier, come from a pretty competitive fitness background. I mean, I'm not winning any world champions or anything like that, championships, but used to do Ironman triathlons and love to lift and hike and camp. And when this happened, all of that stopped because every free minute I had was reading documents that Rob was pushing, reading FDA documents, reading CDC documents. And it didn't hit me how much it affected my physical well-being until things started happening in our favor. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's what it's like to work out 5 days a week, Yeah.
Yep. Now, can you guys, either of you, share any stories of your juniors, things that hit them really hard? I mean, they obviously, they didn't have necessarily your strength or bravery.
I think many of them had a lot more strength and bravery than some of us. In many ways, we had rank behind us, and and me personally, I decided to go on the offense. Like I was aggressive, and I went after admirals for breaking the law, and so they put me on the back burner. And they didn't come after me as hard because I was a problem to deal with later, and they went after junior people. I'm going to tell a story about Danny, Navy SEAL, and this is very emotional, and it's unbelievably tragic. But this I hope for your audience to understand from this story. This was happening all over the place, everywhere. They would isolate service members who did not go along. In this particular case, Danny, Navy SEAL, had just come back from a deployment. He was a very young SEAL. he had come back and said, "Hey, I'm done." His experience over there, he did not have a good experience during his deployment, and he told his leadership, "I want to get out of the military." Well, then the mandate dropped right before he was able to get out. And he's like, "Well, I'm already getting out. I'm not going to take this shot either." And so he got isolated with a bunch of the other Navy SEALs who stood up and said, "We're not going to go along with this." Many of them for their religious beliefs, many of them because they had common sense and integrity not to get a fake shot, or to get a fake card. And so they would isolate these individuals. They denied them training opportunities. They locked them out of their building, took their badges. They would still make them do basic administrative requirements. Like every once in a while, you come in, you take a urinalysis test, make sure there's no drugs or performance enhancing products in your body. They would have to wait outside their building and be escorted around like they were some foreign visitor. These are absolute heroes. The bloody pointy edge of the spear for us. We spent millions of dollars making their bodies and minds some of the best weapon systems that we have. And they're treating these people like they're criminals for exercising what is an absolute right for them constitutionally and what is a right under statutory law for them to exercise. Well, Danny the Navy SEAL and many of these other individuals in this particular group was Team 4, and they were isolated and put aside. They were given menial labor to do. Like they were given yard work and raking leaves and things like that, right? Well, I got a call. This was in September, I believe it was September of 2022. And I got a call from a Master Chief Navy SEAL that I had gotten close to over the course of fighting the mandate. He said, "Hey, I really need you to talk to a couple of my team guys." And so a couple of the more junior SEALs got on a call with me. And one of them was the LPO to Danny, the leading petty officer. And he said, "Hey, I want to let you know that Danny committed suicide." And, they were telling me the story of how tragic this was and how he didn't have anybody. The leadership ignored them and didn't let them exercise their training, didn't let them exercise their bodies, didn't let them exercise their minds. And in the course of the isolation, it ended up being too much for Danny. And it was reported to me that the very last duty that Danny performed for his country was doing the yard work outside the building he was no longer allowed to enter. There needs to be accountability for that from the senior leaders of our military who have done this to service members like Danny.
And his case is not an isolated incident.
I'll tell you this, there were 1,460 suicides during the course of the 3-year mandate. We're going to get to the bottom of this data, but during that same period, they alleged that there were 96 deaths due to the COVID infection. 96. Yet they isolated people, they separated them, they abused them, they coerced them. And there were 1,460 suicides during that same time period. You tell me which is the greater pandemic.
At the top of the show, we said that Secretary Hegseth's orders doesn't go quite far enough. Where is it lacking? When do we need to see?
So again, based on President Trump's executive order, there is a process now for those who were kicked out, 8,700 service members, to apply to come back in. That's problem number one. The DoD caused this issue. We should not put the onus on those service members that suffered from the DoD's decision to now apply to come back in. It's a step in the right direction, don't get me wrong. We're glad that they acknowledged that they were wrongfully discharged and offering an opportunity to come back. The other problem is those were considered involuntary, service members. They kicked out without a choice. Unfortunately, there were many who left service voluntarily, but in reality, it wasn't on a volunteer basis. When a service member is told, you either apply for separation on your own, and if you don't, you will be discharged dishonorably. You will suffer letters of reprimand. You might even go to a court-martial. That is coercion, and that is a threat. And so we have many, many who have suffered in that capacity. And then folks like Rob and I who We missed out on training opportunities, on job opportunities. Many missed promotions. Our records, it didn't matter if you were like the number one on track to be an admiral or general. All of our records, most of us, I shouldn't say all, most of our records then reflected, because we're standing up for what's right and the law, it reflected in our annual performance report. So you could have been number one of this, number one of that, and now all of a sudden you don't get any stratification. And so everybody in the military knows it's your paperwork that gets you promoted. And if you don't have strong paperwork showing what an outstanding person you are, the chances of you getting promoted are nil. So that in and of itself has ruined careers. People who plan to stay in for 20 or 25, 30 years might not have that opportunity now because of the paperwork that was a result of them standing up for the right thing.
How many people how many servicemen quit, but it wasn't voluntary, but on paper it looks voluntary? What's the number, do you guess?
I mean, I don't think there is an exact number. I don't think we're going to find that until we dig deeper. We can guesstimate there were about 95,000 who were affected in some capacity.
Dwarfs the number that were involuntary.
Right. So, and again, grateful for Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, to move forward with this offer to reinstate those 8,700. People are not going to come back just for the money.
Yeah.
We almost got kicked out because of something bigger than profit. It's called integrity. It's called standing up for your constitutional right. And so, we're going to need that level of seriousness if we're really wanting to get the true patriots to come back in.
It's about rebuilding trust.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a possibility where the 90,000 people can be, they can be evaluated to figure out how can we give them an opportunity to come back? I hear you. They might not want to come back, because for me, it would be a major trust issue. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you defy everything that we represent. I never want to be back in this group. That it's almost like coming out of the Matrix, right? Like, they thought and believed their country had their backs, but then they turned their backs on them for an illegal mandate and didn't care about the laws, yet everything in your bones are about the laws, the Constitution. That's why you're here. This is why we have our service men and women. I think there's how could the government earn the trust back of their people to want to even come back? Have you put any thought into that?
Have.
So we have helped as a group. We've drafted some, what originally we had hoped to be an executive order, which we may recraft into a guidance for the Secretary of Defense or the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness to put out. But the idea from our perspective is we stand up a commission that has authority over the Bureau for the Correction of Military Records and the Bureau for the Correction of Naval Records that can direct all of the actions. We don't make service members go hat in hand to the institution that betrayed them to request things. We go top down and we direct the corrections and then make the offers. And then they can accept it or choose not to. And
start with an apology letter.
Oh, yes, that is huge.
Start with inviting them to a shindig with, a group of them together, announcing again a formal apology and how much we would love to have you back. And we were so sorry for all of these things, and maybe even terminating the admiral who did this.
Yeah, so it's not just one admiral. There are admirals and generals throughout the force that made these decisions. And I wrote a document, or I wrote an article with a Vice Admiral Dean Lee, incredible leader. He got out several years before this, but he's been a great mentor of mine. And he and I wrote an article together. Is it the Constitution or the institution? And we lay out how over the last few decades, our leaders have put the institution first. If there's ever a conflict, they they circle the wagons to protect the institution, and they do not protect constitutional rights. And so with that habit in place over the last several decades, we need accountability. We need a few. It doesn't need to be every one of them, because that would be a lot of the force. But it needs to be a few of the 3 and the 4-star level leaders, a few of the SCS leaders who broke the law to be held accountable in some level. And it's, maybe people don't need to go to prison, but we need to do grade determinations on some of these leaders. That means let's find out the last rank at which they served honorably, and their retirement check needs to be reduced to that level. Though there are things that we can do to make sure that an example is set so it's a constitutional deterrence in the future.
I imagine your fight continues still. Tell us about the book. What was the inspiration for the book? When did you start writing this? And
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I have been writing furiously since about September, October of 2021. It was my weapon of choice in going and fighting my own leaders for our constitutional rights. And I realized at some point, especially as the messaging within Congress was, hey, we're going to do everything we can to repeal this mandate. I realized they're going to probably repeal this thing and then try to pretend nothing ever happened. I said, absolutely not. And so the book was birthed out of the idea that we have to document this for posterity's sake so that we do not lose these stories. And I try to tell as little as my personal story in the book as possible. And I tell the stories of Danny. I tell the stories of the service members who were harmed in different ways. I give the legal analysis required to understand the law. And I start with the Founding Fathers. Every opening to each chapter of the book is a founding father who dealt with a similar situation. And I try to tie in that quote from that founding father into that particular part of the book in that chapter. And so the idea was making sure that we never forget this. We tell all these stories, and then we make sure we name the names, because truth matters here, and we're not going to have accountability if we don't speak the truth boldly. Also got to give a massive shout out to Skyhorse, to CHD, Skyhorse Publishing for being behind the book. Tony Lyons and team did a great job. Mary Holland was huge in helping make this happen. So to all those who helped make the book happen, just a massive thank you, because we blasted through a lot of censorship, and it's been something that service members have found really motivating. I've had some people contact me and say, hey, I got PTSD again, going through these stories, reliving this experience. But it's what the American people need to understand what's happened to so many of us. So to Skyhorse Publishing, Tony Lyons, Mary Holland, the whole team, Children's Health Defense Team, thank you very much. You can get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And
it's also on Audible. So if you don't have time or you're trying to multitask and listen to a book.
John Pruden did a great job reading it. It wasn't me.
And that was a great, Rob's book is basically what drove the Children's Health Defense to create a military chapter, knowing that so many military members were suffering from the vaccine mandate, whether they were harmed after having been injected in their bodies, or they were harmed professionally. Moral injury is probably our biggest concern right now. But we also know that there are harms such as the Red Hill fuel disaster that happened in Hawaii. I don't know if you're tracking that. Unfortunately, it's another Navy incident where fuel was leaked into the water supply of those who lived on and near the Navy base out in Hawaii. And so we've got mold in dorms and houses. Like, these are all toxic exposures that are physically affecting our service members. We are harming our service members. And so Children's Health Defense, in October 2023, we created a military chapter. We had our first conference in August of 2023, and now we're in the process of creating a documentary to showcase many of the stories that Rob talks about in his book. And Rob has agreed to be part of that documentary. So we are excited. We meet the board the end of this month to see if they will agree to move forward with this documentary. We think they will, because Mary Holland, that's how we connected. She actually attended our conference back in August last year. and she loved it. And so we're pretty confident that the documentary will get a thumbs up. And so then the next step is, obviously the fundraising and all that good stuff. But we are excited because, like a book, we also think a documentary is going to be pretty powerful to share this story.
We love CHD.
Yeah, it's good.
And they do great work.
Yeah, they do.
And it's important to have that voice and to be able to share with others everything. Tell us real fast, a few minutes about your open letter to the American people. Maybe Alex, you can also put this as a link below. Will you share a little bit about
signatures on the back? What's that one?
So this is so that's only page one of several pages. There's 231, and we use that number quite regularly, 231 wet signatures of either current service members or former service members who signed on to, again, Rob's brilliant words on paper. It reads very much like the Declaration of Independence, but it talks about how we're going to hold the military accountable. So, Rob, it's your
Yeah. So like the book. So we talked about the book. They ignored the book. I was expecting, like when I filed the mutiny complaint, and I was like scared that I was going to get, federal agents at the door. And then, I filed the whistleblower report after that and was expecting some response from, my leaders. The book, I was expecting some response from them. We mailed books to like almost every 3- and 4-star admiral and general. It felt please read this. This is important for you to understand. It completely ignored. And so this document you're talking about is the Declaration of Military Accountability. The idea sprung up because we had been ignored and no one was paying attention to this. And we realized, the cases were being thrown out in court. Congress, only a couple individuals in Congress paid any attention to the military issues with the mandate, and the executive branch was the one causing these problems, right? So our 3 branches of government are not responding. Who else can we go to? Well, the ultimate authority over all those branches is we the people. So this is an open letter to the we the people. We're not, as the 231 and then the now almost 40,000 people who have signed a petition supporting this, it's not requesting anybody else make sure accountability happens. It's a pledge that we have taken ourselves that no matter what happens, we are going to pledge to hold our own leaders accountable. We're going to get members of our networks into positions in Congress. If we ever have the lawful authority to do so in the executive branch at the Secretary of Defense level or the service secretaries, we're going to recall for court-martials, if we're able, some of these retired leaders to bring them back on to do full investigations and then hold them accountable if the investigations determine that they have broken the law, which all evidence indicates that they have, as we have demonstrated. And so the idea is that we're going to do this ourselves. We're part of we the people. We don't, like George Washington said, when you take up the arms as a soldier, you don't lay down the citizen. And that's what we're here to do. We are still citizens of the United States. We are still members of we the people, and we're going to stand for our rights and make sure that our government serves us and not the other way around.
Did you ever think that you would become massive activists?
No, I know. We joke. I'm like, every day it's like, are we getting punked? Like, when are the cameras going to come out? This is not real. Never in a million years. Never. And by activists, like, we're just asking for truth and law and order to return to our beloved Department of Defense. Like, we're not asking for anything over the top, right? Just get it back to the basics.
I mean, my personal opinion is I think you were chosen. I look at everybody that really stood up and fought back, and they were chosen. And it's like God knew who to tap on the shoulder. And when you heard that voice, you knew that you couldn't do anything else. And I could feel that in both your souls. You knew there was no other choice. Like, even though it meant potentially being fired, potentially being court-martialed, potentially being in handcuffs, your soul knew the direction you needed to go in. So once you get your children's health defense, I don't know if you're going to have a website or what you're going to have up. Make sure you send us the link as well so we can post it and share it and help you guys raise some money.
Yeah, thank you.
I really think it's incredible what you've done. And I really, really hope and pray that anybody watching this, reading your book, watching your future documentary says, wait a minute. Next time something like this comes around, let's all just come together as one.
Whenever somebody is canceled, they don't just take their foot off the pedal to you. And I presume you still have some sort of examination going on. Is there anything that's happening right now that's that you feel like your cancellation journey has not completely ended quite yet?
So for me, I mean, I know that this happens to so many service members. When you get on the bad side of your leaders, they keep that microscope on you. And so I have gotten information, this is not even COVID related, but I've been given information from whistleblowers who have been harmed in other ways, criminal actions taken against them. And in this case, it was allegedly committed by some very senior flag officers. I mean, that means admirals, flag officer, judge, advocate general, so lawyers in the Navy. And so I helped get this information to our senior leaders. We've verified some of this information was not frivolous. We've got audio recordings. These were crimes committed against service members and against and alleged crimes committed against the government. Some of it corruption related. And so it's very serious stuff. It's not COVID related. And so, but because of how public we have been, whistleblowers are starting to come out of the woodwork and seeing this and saying, hey, we want to take our government back. Help us get this information out. Some of them want to be anonymous. They want to be protected. And so, in this particular case, after vetting the information that it is real, there is physical evidence that this happened. There's audio recordings. I made sure to get this to senior leaders in the Navy, made sure to get it to the FBI. There has been NCIS investigations opened. And people don't like this kind of thing. And so they keep the microscope on you. And I was informed by an insider that there was a prosecution review done on me. I might have been just a week or two ago to try to see if they could get anything on me and prosecute me for something. And so this is for helping a whistleblower who had crimes committed against them that NCIS is treating as a victim. And so it goes to show you that the people who put the institution first, they're going to continue to do that until we have accountability for these things. And so I offer that. It's not even COVID related, but I offer that for your audience to know that if you stand up and if you go public and you stand for the truth, other people will follow. Other people will get courage and they will join us in the fight, and we'll have more people winning our nation back.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, courage is contagious.
I have hope that we are winning our nation back, one day at a time. What about you, Carolyn? Are you going through anything?
I will say not at the magnitude Rob is. As I mentioned, Rob is leading the effort on all of our activities, fighting corruption within the DoD. Thankfully, I have not been under the microscope. I will also say I don't have as big of a platform on social media, but things have not been good to the point where I have decided to retire this year. Now, granted, we have a new administration, right? I submitted my retirement July of 2024, not knowing that President Trump was going to win, not knowing that Pete Hegseth was going to be our Secretary of Defense. And so now I'm actually excited. We talked earlier when we opened up the show how great it is that we have a true patriot as our Secretary of Defense. And so if there is an opportunity to continue serving, to retract my retirement, stay in uniform, to lead, right, be a leader of honor and integrity and courage, I would be honored to do that. But if that opportunity does not exist, we cannot. I personally cannot continue in the Air Force anymore. It's unrecognizable from when I joined over 20 years ago.
I'll tell you where we need her serving. She's with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. We need her somewhere in the Inspector General's apparatus. We need her leading the Department of Defense and getting to the bottom of this. She's the expert we need doing that. So if we're unable to get her back on the fast track towards flag, then we need her leading at the highest levels.
But we have faith. I mean, none of us predicted today was going to happen 4 years ago. So not knowing that we actually would have an opportunity to right some of these wrongs, it didn't stop us from fighting. So with or without an offer, we're not going to stop fighting. That's the bottom line.
Keep fighting.
Keep fighting.
This was truly a silent war.
It's a spiritual war that's happening.
100%. Do you think that there's a way to, you said everything was about the records and the papers, and your papers are not what they were. Is there a way for that to be cleaned up? Is there a way for you to be put back to where, as if like, let's go rewind. This is who you are. You dedicated your life, 21 years, 20 years. Like, is there a plan?
That is part of
to clean this up so you can get back to where you were and continue servicing our country.
So that goes back to the proposed, we drafted it like an executive order because we did take into consideration all of these nuances that happened. And so we have a game plan on what that would look like. Special boards for folks who didn't get promoted solely because they refused to take the COVID shot. And it's going to take logistical planning to make that happen. But we have many smart people who know how to make it become a thing. And so we're just waiting for our message to get out there and connections to be made so that we can share our ideas with top leadership.
Recently, you were at Mar-a-Lago. If maybe you could share with us what happened, what was the experience, what was the purpose?
Yeah, so it was hosted by America's Future. It's an organization that's been around for several decades, maybe even longer, and they wanted to highlight folks who demonstrated American exceptionalism. And so they had famous people like Mike Tyson, Russell Brand, and during the planning for this event, one of our friends who's on the board suggested we need to highlight and recognize the veterans, whether still serving or past served. And everybody thought that was a great idea. And so they put their heads together and they figured out who from each branch was going to receive the American Exceptionalism Award. And so that is how Rob and I were represented or nominated for this special occasion.
Yeah, there were 5 of us that were honored as service members: Matt Lohmeyer, me, Carolyn, Stu Scheller, and Teresa Long. So one of us from each service. It was a great honor. It was incredible being there. I think we were pretty blown away. First time I've ever been. We don't do events like that. But to see the hope, to see the change that's coming, to see the patriots that were there, it gave us a lot of hope for the future.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I think anybody who's gone through a cancellation journey, that's the purpose of the show, to get the story out, has been selected in some way for a leveling up of your soul or a closer connection with the divine or for whatever reason that's beyond our comprehension.
God.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised by the stance that you took, because you're the military and you are taught integrity and authenticity and standing up for what you believe in. And I'm really grateful that you came on the show and shared your story. And definitely a great role model for your families. And you should be very proud of yourself. And on behalf of the American people, we the people, we really appreciate you. And thank you so much.